All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on this one. Conrad Reicher's Solar Leadership, subtitle, Men's Guide to Balance, Strength, and Legacy. Sounds intense.
Yeah, it's all about helping men, rediscover their purpose.
Especially these days, right? When, well, sometimes the world feels like it's pushing against that whole traditional masculinity thing.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely a hot topic.
But what I found really interesting about Reicher's book is how he uses this solar system analogy.
Yeah, he breaks down these really complex ideas about men's roles by comparing them to, like, the sun and planets.
That's a pretty cool approach.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with that? The sun, I guess.
Right, the sun's like the core, right? That's where that whole solar leadership thing
I
comes
was going
in.
to say, it's kind of in the title, isn't it?
Riker uses the sun as this metaphor for the man as the center of his family, his community. It's like, just as the sun provides, light, warmth, and life to the planets, a man should be providing stability and direction.
So it's deeper than just like being the breadwinner or the stereotypical tough guy.
Exactly. It's about that deeper level of guidance and strength. And he doesn't just pull this out of thin air. He actually gives historical examples, too, like how ancient civilizations used to worship the sun.
Right, like the Egyptians and all that.
Exactly. So this idea of the sun representing a central life-giving force, well, it's been around for centuries.
Wow, so it's almost like a primal, ingrained understanding of a man's place in the world.
That's what he's suggesting.
That's pretty wild. But okay, a solar system isn't just the sun, is it? I mean, there's planets, moons, asteroids, the whole shebang.
Right. And that's where Riker takes this analogy even further.
Okay, so how do those other celestial bodies fit in?
Well, he uses the structure of the whole solar system itself, the way everything orbits the sun, to talk about the need for order and hierarchy.
So it's not just out in space, it's here on Earth too, in our families, in society.
Exactly. Riker's argument is that just like the planets have their set paths around the sun, things work best when everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. And he gets into how modern society's kind of drifted away from those traditional roles, and he thinks that's led to some problems.
I could see where he's going with that. So we've got the sun representing leadership, the planets representing order. But there's still that force that holds it all together, right? Gravity. What does Riker say about that?
He makes this really interesting connection between gravity and power dynamics, how gravity keeps his solar system from just flying apart.
Right.
Well, he argues that a strong leader provides that same kind of gravitational pull that keeps society stable.
So good leadership is like the glue that holds everything together. And without it, things can kind of, spin out of control.
Yeah, he even compares a planet straying from its orbit to the instability that can happen when people try to defy these natural hierarchies.
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack already.
Yeah.
And we're still just talking about the basic setup of the solar system. But from what I understand, Riker doesn't stop there, right? He goes even deeper into those planetary archetypes, like what does Mars represent, or Saturn, or Jupiter?
Right. He uses those planets as symbols for different aspects of masculinity and how men can actually embody those qualities.
Okay, I'm really intrigued. Tell me more about that. Let's start with Mars, the warrior planet, I guess you could call it.
Exactly. Mars is all about assertiveness. It's that instinct to take action and protect, that warrior energy.
So not just aggression, right? It's more about that drive to step up and do what needs to be done.
Right. Riker's really emphasizing that channeling your inner warrior is about standing up for what you believe in, setting boundaries, taking decisive action. It's that protective instinct that men, naturally have.
I can see how that's relevant for a lot of guys today, especially in communities like the Red Pill, where there's this focus on reclaiming masculinity.
Oh, absolutely. And Riker provides examples of how to do that in everyday situations, too, like how to assert yourself at work or, with your kids. It's finding that balance between being passive and overly aggressive.
Makes sense. So we've got Mars as the warrior, but what about Saturn? That's the planet of discipline, patience, right? How does that fit into Riker's picture of masculinity?
Saturn is all about the long game, the slow and steady approach. Riker argues that real leadership, the kind that creates a lasting legacy, it requires discipline, patience. He actually compares it to Saturn's rings.
How so?
He says those rings, they took millions of years to form. It's that slow, steady process of building something lasting, something substantial.
That's a really cool way to think about it. But it can be tough these days, right? Everyone's so obsessed with instant gratification.
Oh, absolutely. Riker acknowledges that. But he offers some suggestions on how to cultivate that Saturnian patience, like setting long-term goals, resisting those quick fixes, really investing in your vision for the future. It's about delaying gratification for something bigger, more meaningful.
So we've got the warrior energy of Mars, the long-term vision of Saturn that leaves Jupiter, right? The king of the planets.
Yeah.
Where does he fit into all of this?
Jupiter represents authority, protection, leadership on a grander scale. He's like the protector of the whole solar system, just like a man should be the protector of his family, his community.
Oh, I like that. So it's like starting with Mars, you have that personal assertiveness. Then with Saturn, it's that long-term planning. And now with Jupiter, it's about stepping into that leadership role in a bigger way.
Precisely. And Riker talks about how this Jupiter archetype has been, kind of challenged in modern society.
Right. There's definitely a push against that traditional idea of male authority.
Exactly. But Riker's book offers ways for men to reclaim that role as protectors and providers, not just for their families, but for their communities as well.
That's really fascinating stuff. It feels like we're already getting some pretty deep insights into what it means to be a man in today's world.
And we've just scratched the surface. Riker goes on to explore all sorts of things: understanding women, building a strong support network, leaving a lasting legacy, all tied back to the solar system metaphor. It's really quite brilliant.
Well, I, for one, can't wait to dive into all of that. But before we do, I just want to make sure our listeners know that if they're as intrigued by these ideas as we are, they can find Solar Leadership on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Absolutely. Definitely worth checking out.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We've got our solar system framework in place. Now let's unpack even more of these fascinating concepts from Solar Leadership. All right, so we're back. And before the break, we were getting into some pretty heavy stuff, right? These planetary archetypes, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, and how men can embody those qualities.
Yeah, Riker really gets into the nitty-gritty of applying those ancient symbols to modern life.
But there's another planet he brings into the mix that I'm kind of curious about. Venus. The planet of love and all that.
Yeah, that's where things get even more interesting. See, Riker doesn't paint this, romantic picture of Venus.
I was going to say, isn't Venus supposed to be all about beauty and harmony?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But he actually uses it as a metaphor for the challenges that men face when it comes to understanding women, especially in today's world.
Oh, okay. So this is where we get into the whole relationship thing.
Exactly. He compares Venus's environment, it's got those crazy high temperatures, that toxic atmosphere, to the complexities of modern gender dynamics.
So he's not saying all women are like that, right? It's more about the overall landscape of relationships being a bit, a bit tricky.
That's a good way to put it. He's acknowledging that things have changed and that navigating relationships requires a certain level of, awareness and even resilience these days. He even talks about how this ties into that whole toxic masculinity thing that gets thrown around so much.
Right, where men are supposed to be both strong and desensitive. It's like a real double bind.
Exactly. And Riker digs into that, exploring how those expectations can be confusing, even contradictory sometimes.
It's like you need a heat shield and a whole lot of fuel just to get into orbit around Venus, let alone land safely.
That's a great analogy. And Riker doesn't just point out the problems, he actually offers some advice on how to navigate this whole Venus situation, so to speak, without losing yourself in the process.
Okay, so what's the secret? How do we navigate this complex Venusian landscape?
He talks a lot about communication, for one thing. He emphasizes that men and women, we often communicate very differently, and that being able to clearly express your needs and boundaries is absolutely crucial.
So it's not just about reading between the lines or trying to guess what the other person is thinking.
Not at all. He's a big advocate for clear, direct communication. But he also stresses the need for emotional intelligence.
Okay, and that doesn't mean being overly emotional, right?
No, not at all. He's talking about being able to understand and manage your own emotions, and being able to empathize with your partner's perspective.
So it's like finding that balance, right, between strength and sensitivity. Not letting go of your masculinity, but also being able to connect on an emotional level.
Exactly. And he brings it back to those other planets, too. He says you need that Martian assertiveness to set boundaries, but also that Saturnian patience to really listen and try to understand where your partner is coming from.
It's like building a multiplanetary spacecraft, isn't it?
Yep.
You need all the right components working together.
I like that. And Raker takes it even further. He also talks about the importance of having a strong support system, especially when it comes to navigating these tricky relationship
He's
dynamics.
talking about that moon's analogy, right? Like
Yeah.
how even the biggest, strongest planets have those smaller bodies orbiting them, providing stability.
Precisely. He makes the point that having a network of like-minded men, guys who get what you're going through, can make all the difference.
It's like having that ground crew back on Earth
Yeah.
supporting you on your mission.
Exactly. He even specifically mentions the red pill community as an example of this kind of support system. He talks about how it provides a space for men to, well, to challenge societal norms and connect with other guys who share their values.
Yeah, and when you're trying to, go against the grain and redefine what masculinity means to you, it can be tough to do it alone. Having that tribe of guys who get it is huge.
Absolutely. And Riker doesn't just talk about finding those communities, he emphasizes the importance of building them too.
So it's not just about taking, it's about giving back, strengthening that network for everyone involved.
That's the idea. It's about recognizing that real strength comes not just from individual power, but from the collective power of a group of men working together.
Okay, so we've got the sun, the planets, the moons, Venus, and the red pill. It's like this whole cosmic view of masculinity that Riker's painting. Where do we go from here?
Well, from there, he takes it to the ultimate level, resilience and legacy. He uses the Earth itself as this grand example. He points out that the Earth has survived, countless challenges over billions of years. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, you name it. But it's still here.
Right, it's pretty resilient.
Exactly. And Riker uses this as a call to action for men, to embrace their strength, to face those challenges head on, and ultimately to leave a positive mark on the world.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving, building something that lasts, that you can be proud of.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
He argues that men have this innate desire to create, to build, to leave something behind that outlives them. And he connects that to the whole idea of being a protector.
Not just of your family, but of your community, your values, your legacy.
Exactly. It's about stepping up and taking responsibility for the things that matter to you. And he goes back to that Jupiter archetype, emphasizing that true leadership isn't about dominating or controlling others.
It's about using your strength to serve and protect.
Exactly. And Riker encourages men to channel that protective instinct into all areas of their lives, not just in a physical sense, but in an emotional, intellectual, even spiritual sense.
So it's about being that rock, that steady presence that others can lean on, especially during those tough times. But how do you actually cultivate that kind of strength? It's not like they teach that in school.
He goes back to that idea of strong bonds between men. He argues that it's through those relationships, through the shared experiences of brotherhood, that men can really tap into their inner strength, develop that resilience that allows them to face whatever challenges life throws at them.
So it's like those moons we were talking about, right? They provide stability, but they also reflect light back to each other. They amplify their strength through those connections.
That's a great way to put it. And he specifically mentions the red pill community again. He sees it as this kind of supportive network where men can learn from each other, share their stories, and ultimately grow together.
It's like having this network of mentors and guides, those who've already walked the path and can offer some wisdom and support.
Precisely. And Riker believes that through this combination of personal growth, strong relationships, and this commitment to leaving a positive legacy behind, well, that's how men can truly find their purpose, make a real impact on the world.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. He's taking this whole cosmic metaphor and showing how these big ideas, they can actually play out in our everyday lives.
And he does it in a way that's both insightful and inspiring. He's not just telling guys what to do, he's encouraging them to think deeply about who they are and what they want to accomplish in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's what really resonates with guys, especially those who are, maybe questioning the traditional definitions of masculinity and looking for a more authentic path.
Definitely. He's offering a new framework, a new way of looking at the world and our place in it. And that's exciting.
Well, I'm definitely feeling fired up after this conversation.
Me too. It's amazing how much wisdom we can find just by, looking up at the night sky and considering those ancient symbols.
And for our listeners who are ready to embark on their own journey of self-discovery, I want to remind you that you can find Solar Leadership on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's a must-read for any man who's serious about understanding himself, understanding the world, and ultimately leaving his mark.
Absolutely. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into solar leadership. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep reaching for the stars. Okay, so we've been through a lot with this solar leadership thing, right? We've got our sun, our planets, even our moons and Venus.
It's a whole system.
It is. But if you had to boil it all down,
Yeah.
what's the main point Riker's trying to make? What does he want guys to take away from all of this?
He keeps coming back to this idea of resilience, of legacy. Like, how do you, as a man, not just survive, but actually thrive? And then how do you leave something lasting behind?
So it's bigger than just figuring out your own life. It's about like contributing to the world in a meaningful way.
Right. He uses this really interesting example, Earth itself.
Okay, and what does Earth have to do with masculinity?
Well, think about it. The Earth's been through so much, right? Over billions of years, ice ages, asteroid impacts, you name it.
Yeah, it's taken a beating.
But it's still here, still going strong. And Riker's saying men need to have that same kind of resilience.
I can see that. So not just weathering the storm, but coming out stronger on the other side. But how do you, actually do that?
He connects it back to those archetypes, especially Jupiter.
The king, the protector.
Yeah. He says true leadership, it's about using your strength to provide, to protect, to guide others, not about, controlling them.
It's interesting because when you think about Jupiter, it's got this huge gravitational pull, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of shielding those inner planets from getting smashed by asteroids.
Exactly. It's that same kind of energy, being the strong, steady force that others can depend on, especially when things get rough.
But that can be hard, right? Life throws a lot of curveballs. How do you build that kind of strength, that resilience?
Well, he keeps coming back to this idea of brotherhood.
The red pill community again.
It's an example, yeah. But more broadly, he's talking about the importance of strong bonds between men, that sense of shared experience, of having other guys who get it, who've been through similar challenges.
So it's not just about finding your own strength. It's about like drawing strength from others, from those connections.
Yeah, he uses this image of the moons. They orbit the planets, they provide stability, but they also reflect light back at each other.
Oh, I see. So like they're amplifying each other's strength through those connections.
That's a great way to put it. And Riker, he believes that it's this combination of personal growth, strong relationships, and this commitment to leaving a positive legacy. That's how men can truly live a fulfilling life, a life of purpose.
Man, that's deep. So it's like, it's not enough to just figure yourself out. You got to use what you've learned to make the world a better place, to leave your mark.
That's exactly it. He's challenging us to step up and be the best versions of ourselves, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of everyone around us and for future generations.
That's, that's inspiring. It's a lot to live up to, but it's definitely something to strive for.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Riker's book so powerful. It's not just about understanding masculinity. It's about tapping into this deeper sense of purpose.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of guys are searching for these days. So for anyone listening who wants to check it out for themselves, Riker's book, Solar Leadership, you can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Definitely worth a read. It might just change your whole perspective.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring these ideas as much as we did. Until next time, keep searching, keep growing, and keep aiming for the stars.